to order this hearing of the Minnesota Senate Tax Committee. Quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes from Thursday, April 10th. Our starting time, by the way, is 9:03. Are there any corrections or additions to Thursday, April 10th minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved as presented. The first item on our agenda today is number 4 on the agenda, Senate File 3194. Senator Putnam. Just 1 second. Senator Putnam offers the A4 amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Senator Putnam, Senate File 3194 as amended.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for hearing Senate File 3194. Madam Chair and members, as we all know, our higher education system is struggling due to social change and a lack of funding. The percentage of the state budget dedicated to higher education has shrunk precipitously over the last 20 years, and enrollment has changed as well. Students have increasingly come to depend on the state grant to make college affordable. Now, every year, individuals and organizations come to St. Paul to advocate for more funding for the state grant, but given the lack of budget priorities shown to higher ed, state grant advocacy is often in contest with the other two major funding needs, the Minnesota state system and the University of Minnesota. This past year, due to changes in the federal formula and increased enrollment, the state grant and those who need it suffered a $211 million deficit. This crisis makes clear something that we should have known all along. Madam Chair and members, the state grant needs its own source of dedicated and stable funding. This bill satisfies that need. To the bill itself, Madam Chair, this bill would create a new excise tax on the growth of assets at higher education institutions. Section 1 of the bill creates a dedicated special revenue fund dedicated for the collection of this tax and the state grant program. Section 2, subdivision 1, defines important terms. Most importantly, the tax would only apply to institutions with assets valued at over $100 million. And the tax itself would apply to asset growth, not the assets themselves. Subdivision 2 establishes the tax on asset growth. Subdivision 3 articulates the rate of the tax to the endowment per student at a qualifying institution. For example, the University of Minnesota has an endowment of $5.5 billion, but its per student endowment is $96,000. The tax on the increase in value of its assets not used to fulfill its purpose would be 15%. In contrast, Carlson College has an endowment of $1.6 billion, but its per student endowment is $600,000. So it would pay a rate of 25%, again, exclusively on the change in value, the investment income that it accrued in a given year. Subdivision 4 clarifies what counts as an asset of an institution. Subdivision 5 allows for audits and other administration of the account. Subdivision 6, deals with reporting. Subdivision 7 requires the commissioner at OHE should deposit revenue from the tax into the special revenue account. Now, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, 2 quick notes in closing. This proposal, while new to Minnesota, is not coming from nowhere. The Republican Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed in Congress in 2017 included a 1.4% tax on endowment income that equals more than $500,000, endowment income that equals more than $500,000 per student, which affects 56 universities nationally. There are current congressional proposals being drafted that would increase this tax rate to as much as 21%. These federal taxes are largely punitive. Ours would go directly to supporting Minnesota students and the institutions that accept the state grant. Also, it's important to note that an institution could spend more of its assets on fulfilling its purpose and serving its actual students. Financial aid, lower tuition, these are all investments that these institutions could make with their endowments to reduce the growth in assets, thereby limiting their exposure to this new excise tax. Ultimately, Madam Chair and members, this bill encourages nonprofit higher education institutions to be accountable, to live their mission and support the students of Minnesota. Thank you very much for your time, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there questions for Senator Putnam at this time? Seeing none, we'll invite Mr. Greg Goldman as a witness. And as he comes forward, we're direct members' attention to the letter from the Minnesota Private College Council, who, for whatever reason, chooses not to testify, but I do direct your attention to their letter of opposition. So, Mr. Goldman, and there is a revenue estimate in your packets showing for the next, not this year, but FY '27, '28, and '29, a considerable tax for the purpose described by Senator Putnam. Mr. Goldman, welcome to the Tax Committee.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Greg Goldman, and I serve as...
Sir, excuse me, could you bring the mic as close to your mouth?
Sorry, is that better?
Thank you, yes.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Greg Goldman, and I serve as the Executive Vice President for Finance and Operations and Chief Financial Officer for the University of Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts today on Senate File 3194, and thank you to Senator Putnam for our earlier conversations about his proposal. The University of Minnesota supports the end goal of stabilizing the state grant program, and we appreciate the A1 amendment narrowing the scope of the bill. That said, the legislation remains challenging to interpret and apply, particularly in how it defines key terms, determines thresholds, and accounts for the different categories of student and institutional funds. For example, a significant portion of the university's endowment value is tied to the Permanent University Fund, PUF lands, whose use is directed by state statute and managed by the Department of Natural Resources. Other sources like bond proceeds, working capital, or other funds we administer on behalf of the state may also be unintentionally swept into a definition of institutional aid without clear justification. It's also important to recognize that institutional financial aid is not a singular pot. It spans scholarships, operations, and commitments tied to regulatory and donor restrictions. Details like these and how they are treated will have a real influence on any financial implications to the university and should be considered as part of the bill language. I would also like to highlight that as the state's only R1 research university, we're already facing extreme headwinds and a disproportionate amount of budget uncertainty at the federal level. As those conversations and actions out of Washington, D.C. continue, stability and certainty at the state level has had heightened importance. This proposal could raise new potential uncertainties and unintended consequences within our budget. The University of Minnesota remains committed to partnering with the state and federal government to provide strong financial aid offering to our students, and we again support the intention here for the state grant program. We would welcome the chance to continue working with the author on this proposal to help make it as impactful as possible. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Senator Putnam, would you, he referenced your, he referenced appreciation for the A1 amendment. Would you please explain that, please?
Madam Chair, I don't have that with me currently, that version of, that earlier version of the bill and its contrast with the A1 amendment.
Senator Putnam.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Do you have the bill in front of you?
I do, Madam Chair.
Okay, if you look on page 2, line 7, after assets, insert not. And then page 2, delete lines 28 and 29. So what does that do to the bill, please?
Yeah, Madam Chair, so the not,
I really do want it explained, first of all, by Senator Putnam, and then you can continue to discuss why you appreciated it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Putnam.
Madam Chair, I think it just refines what we think of as being an asset. I think that's the primary goal of these
The
alterations here,
definition of
is to
what an
refine the
asset
definition of what
is.
exactly
Okay,
an asset
thank
is.
you.
And I do want to take a moment as well, if I can, Madam Chair, to thank Mr. Goldman for his clarity and thoughtfulness in talking about how that word asset matters for the U differently than it does for other institutions in our higher education ecosystem.
I think that's a very important distinction, so that's why I wanted to come back to it. Senator Putnam, in the, I'm not sure of the status of the higher education finance bill at this point. Can you explain that now?
Certainly.
Senator Fate's committee, where is that right now?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a parallel bill exploring a similar concept that we thought was more appropriate to that jurisdiction. That parallel bill was not a tax. It was a participation fee in the state grant. So it was very similar in structure to this bill, but it was not an actual tax. It was a participation fee for
Senator
the state
Putnam,
grant.
what I'm interested in is the omnibus bill does not have, has a fee in it. It does not have it.
Madam Chair, that
It's
portion of the
not
bill
in
did
it.
not make it in, no.
And so Senator Putnam, what is the status of the omnibus higher education finance bill, particularly with regard to state grants? Have they been zeroed out?
No, so Madam Chair, the budget target for the higher education bill was $100 million. Alterations were made in the way that the state grant is calculated to limit some of the consequences, but also some resources were moved around to make up that gap. So all in all, I think about $100 million of the deficit was taken care of by changes in the actual state grant formula as we allocate it, and the other $100 million came from the budget target.
And do the changes in that bill favor public colleges and universities or private colleges and universities or neither?
Madam Chair, the state grant as a whole privileges the private colleges. It's important to acknowledge that fact, that in terms of the actual money that goes to an institution. So for example, a student at the College of St. Benedict gets an average state grant benefit of around $5,000, between $5,000 and $6,000. A student at St. Cloud Community Technical College gets a benefit of average about $900. So in terms of the actual dollars and where they're allocated, the state grant as a whole privileges the private institutions significantly. In terms of those changes, I think they are relatively agnostic in terms of the kinds of students that would be taking advantage of the state grant.
Mr. Goldman, do you believe, or does the University of Minnesota believe that Senator Putnam's bill is unconstitutional?
I would not have enough knowledge, given my background, to state what my belief is or what the university's belief is in that, and certainly would have to come back with that information, given that I'm not a lawyer and have not pursued that avenue.
The letter from the private college council, suggests, Senator Putnam, that your bill suffers from not adhering to the Constitution, or at least raises that issue, and I think members should be aware of that, although simply stating the Constitution does not give an argument for its constitutionality, as we all know.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for acknowledging
Are
that.
there
It's a lot
other
easier to claim
questions
that
for-
than to actually prove it.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Senator Hauschild.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Senator Putnam, for bringing this forward. Perhaps I'm not fully understanding, but I just wanted to ask. I used to do higher education philanthropy, so I've sort of been in this world previously in my life. You know, when a higher education institution creates an endowment, their idea is that over, the history of that endowment, they would have ups and downs and growth, and usually they pay out 4% in scholarships or operating support to the higher education institution, but they might not have growth over 4% every year, right? They might dip below, they might have to sort of balance things out. So what I'm understanding is this is an excise tax on that growth. But if it's below, let's say, 4% some years and still considered growth, would we still be putting an excise tax on that endowment growth? And if so, sort of, are we taking into consideration the long-term health of that endowment, should it, not be far above 4% every year?
Senator Putnam.
Madam Chair, Senator Hauschild, the idea of having a kind of floor to this is something that I would entertain. But
Yeah.
again, let's recall, this is a percentage of increase. So if there is no increase, or if that increase is smaller, then the percentage that the institution would pay in becomes significantly smaller too.
Yeah.
That I think is a really important variable here, is this is not cutting into operating costs. It has nothing to do with the viability of the institution, as the Chicken Littles are likely to claim.
Yeah.
It's about a lesser amount of interest income that then becomes repurposed towards actually helping students,
Yeah.
rather than acting as a financial institution rather than an educational one.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, thanks, Senator Putnam, for that response. I think it's an interesting concept. I just would sort of consider how we can make sure that the endowment long-term is healthy and what that sort of floor is to ensure that that happens, while, to your point, directing this where it really needs to be, which is students.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree, Madam Chair. I think the institutional autonomy part of our Constitution for the University of Minnesota is something that really we should scrutinize in relation to this bill. For the state to tax something at the University of Minnesota would be, I think, would be a direct violation of the Constitution. But I'm curious about this approach. And this is for Senator Putnam, looking at the assets in these funds, would this then disincent people from contributing to the university, donors, because would that money then be taxed? So if the amount is at the threshold that it begins to be taxed in that endowment, would that disincentivize people from contributing more? And because would that additional contribution then, on top of that, then be taxed under this bill?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Madam
And
Chair.
I would point out that the objection to constitutionality did not come from the University of Minnesota or public universities. Mr. Goldman expressed no opinion. It came from the private college council, Senator, just to make sure that that's where the objection arose. And it may be, we could find out that the university shares that concern of the private college council, but they're not the ones that raised it. Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Drazkowski. And I do think that this question of constitutionality, while a red herring part of it, is not entirely off base, because I do think it points to the distinction between some of the institutions that are impacted by this. So, for example, if we cut if the floor is a $100 million endowment per institution, that's the U, and then $600 or $700 million endowment per institution. That's the U, and then 6 or 7 private colleges. So the U is the only public college that fits within this space, so it's the only one with an endowment large enough to be the subject of this tax. So that's a different question than the rest of the institutions. And I will point out again that in 2017, the federal government taxed endowments, and it was not considered unconstitutional then under the first Trump administration. So I'm not entirely sure it would be this time either. But to your question about disincentivizing, that's difficult for me to answer. I don't have billions of dollars, and I'm not donating to colleges. I would think, and I would hope, that individuals who donate to colleges donate for the strength of the institution, but also for those students themselves who go there. And if that is your incentive, if that's why you're donating, this tax should be completely irrelevant to you.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Putnam. I'll look further at this bill as it goes along. It's definitely novel, as you pointed out. I don't know that we need any more tax money. This big, huge government that we have doesn't need any more revenue. We got a spending problem here. So I don't know why we're hearing more tax increase bills, Madam Chair, but we have yet another one before us here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Are there any further comments for Senator Putnam. Senator Putnam, would you like to make a final statement?
Thank you again for the time, Madam Chair, and members, and Madam Chair, for your excellent questions. I will acknowledge the complexity of the actual details in this bill. Those details still exist to be worked out, and I'm glad that Mr. Goldman has been so helpful in that conversation. A little bit disappointed that our friends at the private colleges weren't interested in being on the record to talk about this issue, because I'm sure they have some questions too. But I think it's important that we look at this as a potential logical, coherent solution to a clear problem. We need to make the state grant stable, supported, independent. This is a way to do that from the institutions that benefit most from it. So to me, it makes sense, but I will acknowledge that there are still details that should probably be worked out a little bit. So thank you again, Madam Chair and members, for the opportunity to talk about those details.
Of course, and once again, I direct, as we lay this bill over as amended, I direct members' attention to the letter in opposition from the private college council, and once again, regret that they decided not to testify. So with that, Senate file 3194 is amended, is laid over. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Number 2 on our agenda, or number 2 to be heard, which is number 5 on our agenda, is Senate File 186, Senator Gustafson. Senator Hauschild offers the A3 amendment on behalf of the author. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Senator Gustafson, if you would explain your bill as amended. Welcome to the committee.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So SF 186 is a teacher tax credit bill. I brought something similar to you last year. It seeks to address the critical issue of teacher compensation and retention in Minnesota by establishing a refundable income tax credit for eligible teachers. By providing the direct financial support to these dedicated professionals, we're looking to recognize the immense value of their work, but also a meaningful step towards ensuring that students have high-quality education by teachers who have a paycheck that matches their investment in our community. This credit will serve as an important tool to attract and retain qualified teachers, particularly those early in their careers, and demonstrate our state's commitment to investing in those teachers. So the credit details from the bill as amended. The bill provides a $1,200 income tax credit for eligible teachers. Eligible teachers are those with a full-time teaching position equivalent to a 1.0 who are licensed to teach K-12 in Minnesota public or charter schools, or a pre-K teacher licensed under current law or exempt from the licensure requirement as a teacher who has taught in a preschool school readiness plus, pre-kindergarten program, or other early learning program for at least 5 years prior. If it's the case that the couple is married, 2 teachers are married to each other, each spouse is eligible for the credit. It's a refundable credit. The funding would provide the state would provide the funds necessary to cover it, and the effective dates would be tax years 2025 to 2027. That is the bill.
Okay, thank you, Senator Gustafson. Are there, she has explained the bill. It is I would note that it is a refundable credit, and it is, if you look at the revenue estimate, it costs about $100 million a year to put this in place. Senator Gustafson, one of the things that is noted on the revenue estimate is that the bill does not provide a definition of a teaching position. Why is that?
So, Madam Chair, on
do you have the, I'm sorry, do you have the revenue estimate in front of you?
I do. So I guess I'm confused. It says, Madam Chair, the K-12 licensed teacher, is that, you're looking for a definition beyond that?
if you look at that paragraph, it says that the bill does not provide a definition of a teaching position. So the revenue estimate is not based on that. And further, it says it is assumed that a principal who has a valid license and meets the number of required student contact days would be eligible for the credit. However, teachers who provide instruction to a child at a home school would not be eligible for the credit. Do you agree with that assessment?
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you for pointing that out.
And why would you want principals to get this credit?
Madam Chair, when we were thinking about who would qualify, we were looking at in-classroom instruction, which occasionally principals do as well. And that is why homeschool was not included. We're looking for that for teachers in classroom teaching.
I think it obviously, as you acknowledge, a very expensive bill, but it would be, would seem to me if the definition was more specific and more limited, that the targeted population that you are looking to give some acknowledgement of the costs of being a public school teacher or in obviously a public charter school, that cost might be reduced. Senator Klein. I'm sorry. Any questions or any response to just what I said, Senator Gustafson, before I call on Senator Klein?
Oh, no, Madam Chair, I just was going to say that's really helpful feedback. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You bet. Senator Klein.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Gustafson, for the bill. Getting creative about ways to support our educator workforce on chronically sort of overworked and under reimbursed, and I'm so grateful you bring these ideas forward. I don't have an opinion on the right way to answer this question, but I'm interested in what your thinking was when you wrote the bill, that you also included educators who serve at private high schools or private schools and charter schools. And sometimes we, at the legislature, have sort of directed monies to public institutions, but not to private institutions. And I just wondered what your thinking was on sort of including those in the definition of educator in your bill.
Senator Gustafson.
Madam Chair and Senator Klein, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, I certainly hope not, but I believe this is only for public schools. So at least that was my intention when writing the bill. And the reason behind it is not to discount all of the hard work that is done at private schools, but we are really looking, as we know, QComp is a continuing conversation every year in education finance. We are looking for ways to, if that is in jeopardy, if that goes away, if that stays, would be great. But if it goes away, are there other ways that we can sort of incentivize sort of a teacher bonus that would replace that program? And that is not something that is offered at every school. So the motivation behind it was worried about QComp being in jeopardy. Is there another way that we can supplement a teacher's salary to replace what schools use as an incentive?
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Senator Klein, I would note that the A3 amendment is a DE amendment, and it does not cover private school educators. Okay. That was one. Otherwise, it would have been, the revenue estimate would have been even greater. She did make one limit on that with regard to who a licensed teacher is. Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Gustafson, thank you for supporting our teachers. I speak as one of those teachers, former teachers, and it is true. Teachers' salaries do not keep up with the cost of inflation, and the challenges continue to grow as well. So it is a challenge, and we have a teacher shortage. So I appreciate the motivation and the desire for this bill. I would be remiss, though, well, first, I just have to mention a couple things. Just for the record, charter schools are public schools, so let's make sure that's very clear. And then, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the omission, even in the DE3. Our home schools do a phenomenal job, very accountable. Now, the classroom might
Excuse me,
be
Senator.
at the dining room table.
Never mind. No,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The classroom might be at the dining room table, but the point is the teaching is being done. Some homeschools have co-ops, for example, where they, one family might teach science, another family might be teaching the English. So I'm just saying, it seems really rather short-sighted, and while we don't cast motives in the Senate, I can't think of a different word other than mean. I don't mean to say that I'm casting motives. I'm just saying it just seems a little bit harsh to be purposely excluding homeschoolers. And that comes, and I don't think we want to be known as a state like that. We should not be known as a state that is out and anti-homeschoolers. And yet that is what is coming across. If we look at the governor's budget, the governor's proposed budget takes away the very slim, not even percent, of education funding that for decades has gone to support transportation. In this case, it doesn't matter as far as homeschoolers, but books, health, those type of things are incredibly important. And I would just thoughtfully ask that you consider including homeschoolers in this bill. I'd at least see what that revenue estimate is. But I think we do a great disservice if our state comes across as one who penalizes or has some prejudice against homeschoolers. Thank you.
Senator Gustafson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Nelson. It is not meant as an insult to exclude homeschool teachers. The biggest thing, in addition to trying to bring a salary that matches the cost of living for teachers, is to address the workforce issue. There is not a shortage of homeschool teachers in our state. That's not one of the problems we're trying to tackle. We're trying to bring more teachers into the classrooms in our public schools. So homeschool teachers, they work hard too. I think all of us had a taste of what they go through when we all taught our kids at home during COVID. And so, you know, they were probably excellent during those days in ways that I wish I would have been. But we don't have a homeschool teacher shortage. In our schools across the state, we are desperately trying to add more teachers and also at the same time respect teachers who want to retire with a respectful retirement. So it's also a workforce bill, if that makes sense.
Of course, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I understand what you're saying, but it can precipitate a teacher shortage if more of our children, whose parents, by the way, are paying property taxes to go to public schools, but are choosing to either homeschool or send them to private schools, if those parents, for some reason, no longer take on that additional responsibility over and above the property taxes that they're paying because they're doing what they think is best for their child. And if those kids suddenly choose to come to our public schools, I would just say that it is not a straight line to say there's no shortage of homeschool teachers. There is a shortage of teachers. And if we are disincenting one type of teacher, those children will be going somewhere else. So again, I'm just hopeful for a little broader thought on this, and I appreciate this discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. I would point out that in referring back to Senator Gustafson's opening comments, that this bill last year had a different focus. This year, you're offering it also in anticipation of QComp, which is solely for public school teachers. That's what's going to be lost. That's what's going to be a disincentive. Homeschool teachers don't receive QComp because there's nobody to receive it to or from. So I think that That is one reason. This does not apply to homeschool teachers because it is not trying to solve an issue that is before the legislature right now with regard to funding for our schools. And we know that the Senate plan at this point removes the 2023 provision with regard to inflation and takes the cut to the Senate Education Finance Bill, K-12 bill, E-12 bill in that regard. Is that provision still in that bill, that provision, both getting rid of inflation? Does the Senate K-12 bill also take the advice of the governor and remove Q-Comp, or is Q-Comp still paid for in the K-12 bill? And I believe you serve on that committee. If you
Yes,
could help us out with
yes,
that.
Madam Chair. We have unlinked it, and the Senate position has unlinked it from inflation, and I believe we do still include Q-Comp as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions for Senator Gustafson? Senator Hauschild.
Thank you, Senator Rest. Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Really appreciate you bringing this bill forward again. Couple of comments. I know the homeschooling debate is an important one, and I agree, we need kids to have equal access to education in all ways. However, I would just point out that homeschool educators do not have the same licensure requirements as public school teachers. And so that's sort of another workforce argument. We're requiring certain, requirements on our public school teachers, and we're providing, in theory, this credit as sort of an incentive for that types of educational needs and certifications they get. I would also just say what I love most about this bill is needs and certifications they get. I would also just say what I love most about this bill is it's a direct credit to our teachers. We fund education in many ways, but then they have to go through contract negotiations and they have to figure out how to get that money ultimately to the teacher in the classroom who does the work. And I appreciate superintendents and school boards and teachers and all these, negotiations that have to happen. But what I love, again, about this bill is we're just providing a credit to the teachers to help pay them more for the great work that they do as a public good for our kids' future. And that's what I think is so simple and great about this bill. Now, it is costly, and finding a way to pay for it is certainly important part of the debate, but at the end of the day, it's just a great proposal and a good idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Hauschild. Any other comments? Senator Gustafson, a final comment from you, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just to build on top of that, I know, last year's bill also had a big price tag. I know this one does as well. And I think the point is just to keep coming back here every year to remind people that at some point, if we are going to talk about raising salaries for teachers, it's going to cost something, whether it comes out of taxes or comes out of ed finance. Somehow the state pays for it and should, to increase the salaries of teachers across our state. So the conversation continues, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Senate File 186, as amended, is laid over. The next bill on our agenda is number 6 on the agenda. It's number 3 today. Senator Abeler. Senator Weber, this is not, we need to be sure, this is not the committee of origin. This is a bill that was heard here, then went to transportation, and now is back. So I'm going to ask you to offer the amendment for the author, but with the understanding it's not an author's amendment as we understand it. Is that agreeable? Yes. Senator Weber offers the A5 amendment. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. And I would then, even though we have adopted it as a courtesy, Senator Abeler, would you go through the A5 amendment for us?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, and thank you. And I think that you deal with great matters of state here. And some of these projects are small, and they just make you feel like you want to smile about some of the things that happen. This bill has come a long ways. Last year, there was a first-come, first-serve thing about these e-bike rebate. They were $1,000 each. I believe in 11 seconds, they were satisfied, and the program was fulfilled. And so that became a problem. I think 1% of Minnesota tried to get a rebate or something like that. So with the help of this committee and interested parties and the e-bike crew, this program has been totally reformed. And so it was once set aside for 40% low and moderate income people, and the rest was all open to the public. The first change we made was to limit it to people of moderate and low income. And then we changed it to a lottery, which would allow people a chance to get it. And then in the Transportation Committee, it was suggested that we actually focus it more on people with disabilities. And that's what the amendment you have in front of you. There's also some, and Revenue has been great to work with on this. In the past, they've actually, even though it wasn't written in the law, they required that people have filed the tax form. We spell that out here, so it's what they're going to do what they did, but we just gave them the leave to do what they did. There was a little more
So
need.
Senator Abeler, is that, are you referring to lines 17 and 18 of the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair.
And just say that again, what that does, because
Oh.
it seems to be, other than an effective date, and then lines 29 and 30 of the amendment with the reference to persons with disabilities. So there are two things. What is the
Yes.
first thing?
Yes, Madam Chair. And so that is the way they actually did it. And so we just spelled out that that's a good way to do it. So they actually required the people who were going to be the winners to have filed a tax return.
Okay.
We were silent on that. They made a very valid assumption, and that's how they operated. So it seemed worthy to put it in as a criteria, so then they would feel at liberty to continue that practice.
Okay, are there questions?
And Madam Chair, the second part is actually
Okay.
relevant as well. So I was just kind of bringing it into a whole thing here. And so the second part was to actually, there's an income need, but also a physical need. And this will not be the final language. The Department of Revenue is, like I mentioned, has been really good to work with on this. They're very interested in this project. They're happy to be the host for it. And so to decide what a person with a disability is requires a little more fleshing out. A couple of states have already done this, and we're going to sit down with them. And wherever this bill winds up traveling, in your bill or the transportation bill, which will be someone's decision besides mine, just that it's in some bill somewhere, will be fleshed out, and then that'll be clarified in a way that they can do that without any cost and confusion. But the point is that the priority would be given to a person with a disability. What I had in mind originally was if you have a disability driving permit or you're eligible for one, there's a better way to do it than that, but that's the idea. And so we also reduced the amount from $1,500 to $750, which is actually quite appropriate to get a bike these days. And I have a testifier if you have questions about that. But so this will give up to around 3,000 people with a disability the chance to buy an e-bike, which actually becomes a mobility program for people with disabilities, which I think is a great improvement. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Are persons with disabilities defined in the first engrossment? Where do we look for a definition of, we see it referenced, but where is that definition?
Madam Chair.
Where does that come from?
That comes from the Transportation Committee discussion, and it seemed like a great improvement to actually make this program
I know,
even
but
more
where
viable.
is it in your bill?
It's in the amendment, Madam Chair. And
Beg
so
pardon?
it's in the amendment, and it
I
gets
know,
to be
but it just
fleshed out.
refers to persons with disabilities. Who is a person with a disability? Ms. Pollock, can you help us with that? Is that defined someplace?
Madam Chair,
Madam Chair, members, that term is not defined in the amendment or the bill as currently engrossed.
Senator Abeler, I think you're still needing a definition or a reference to somewhere in the law where there is where persons with disabilities there is a definition there, and I don't know where that might be, but I think we probably have to find that so that it is not a self-identified affirmation, but that it people can refer with confidence to a part of state statutes that would qualify them as a person with disabilities.
And Madam Chair?
I'm just-
Absolutely, yes.
I'm not questioning it
Right.
in terms of the motives or anything like that, but I think the language is not specific enough.
Madam
And
Chair.
so we're going to take a look at that probably.
Right, and I agree with you, and there's discussions with Revenue begun this morning about how to properly define that. And there's some other states that had a sample version. We're going to, by the time this ever gets ready to go to conference or come out, there'll be a really nice definition that I believe that everybody will like, and you'll certainly get a chance to weigh in on that.
There is, are there any other questions at this time before we call on the testifier? And Senator Abeler, we are going to, at least temporarily, we're going to keep the bill here to deal with that definitional question, but it may well be taken. We're going to put it on the table. Maybe it'll come back up and be able to move it directly to the Committee on Transportation at that time. Senator Drazkowski, questions or comments before we hear from the witness?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Abeler. I've got a bill to get rid of this program.
What?
I have a bill to get rid of this program. I
Well,
like
there
it
you
much
go.
better, Senator Abeler, than this one. But I'm wondering how much money is left in the account that hasn't been spent. I thought this was one-time money last time, right? Does anybody know how much money is left?
Senator Abeler.
Madam Chair, there was $4 million, $1.5 million was spent, $2 million was targeted, and there's $2.5 million left.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Anyone else? Welcome to the committee. If you would identify yourself for the record, we're happy to have your testimony, sir.
Thank you, Chair, rest members. My name is Michael Wojak. I'm the Executive Director of the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Very appreciative of the opportunity to testify on this bill and amendment. We particularly appreciate the work of Senator Abeler to really focus in on how we can do the most good with what is admittedly a relatively small amount of money. We know that when this went live last year, that at approximately the same time, middle of the day, more than 1% of Minnesotans were online trying to get the rebate at the same time, and that's why it was gone in a matter of seconds. And it speaks to how popular these modes of transportation have become to a lot of people. Now, I can tell you that 30% of Minnesotans don't drive. I can tell you that 10% of households don't have access to a vehicle. And I can tell you that the most effective way to those areas, those people, particularly in greater Minnesota that don't have fixed route transit, is an e-bicycle. We're seeing that uptake all over the state of Minnesota. The statistics don't speak to the real power of this program. Last Friday, I was at 125 Live, which is a senior citizens center, active adult center in Rochester, and I was approached by somebody unsolicited who said, hey, I just lost my license. I can't drive anymore. Would you be willing to help me figure out how I can use a bicycle to get around? And we had that conversation about, well, have you thought about an e-bike? Have you thought about how is your balance? Do you need 2 wheels? Do you need 3 wheels? And those conversations are going on all over the state. These are not inexpensive to purchase. The rebate certainly helps it. The rebates get spent at businesses here in Minnesota. What Senator Abeler's amendment does is it really focuses, instead of anything goes, it focuses on those lower income households and those with a disability. And yes, we're working with revenue to codify how do we effectively apply that. But with the limited amount of dollars that are left, and this is not an increase in spending, these are dollars that were previously allocated, we are looking to impact positively the lives of more Minnesotans who use this not just as a fun toy or recreation, but as an important part of transportation, particularly in greater Minnesota. We are appreciative of the continued work on the bill, and ultimately we want to hold this up as something that is a good use of money, empowering the lives of people who don't have other transportation options throughout the state of Minnesota. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the witness? Senator Hauschild, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Abeler, truly. I think in our politics and in the legislature, it's often the case that when things look divisive or like an easy target, it's easy to just use politics on an issue and sort of slam it. And instead, you've taken an issue that we've had with this bill and actually worked with everybody on how to come to solutions and how to make it work better. And not everybody does that. And so I commend you for the work that you've done. I'm not sort of deep in the details of what all you've done, but I want to say that you've sort of put forward a good faith effort to improve this program, and I think that matters. The only other thing I would say is it's incredible to see the popularity of these e-bikes representing just outside of Duluth. I will tell you it's a very hilly city if anybody hasn't been there, and the amount of people that I hear from about how they have now biked to work or used biking because they can have an e-bike that is able to get up those hills. I mean, it's just a tremendous growth opportunity for people to get outdoors, to get more accessibility, especially the disabled community. So I commend you for your work is all I wanted to say. It really is important that I think we work in good faith on these policy issues, and you've done that. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hauschild. Any further discussion? Senator Abeler.
Well, Madam Chair, I really appreciate the attention to this. I actually appreciate the guidance from both your committee and the Transportation Committee in this process. And I think we've taken a bill that, frankly, I don't blame Senator Drazowski for wanting to get rid of the original program because it was, frankly, quite soft and not focused. I think if this can go forward the way it is, we'll actually empower 3,000 people who don't have access or need access to with their disability to go. Just a quick anecdote, I was at Aldi in Coon Rapids, and this fellow was in the aisle with a little e-bike, and he did not drive, he could barely walk, he was a veteran, and he was in the aisle with a little box on the back of his e-bike shopping, and we chatted, and I thought, well, what an interesting thing, and that just adds weight to the merits of where this bill has gone and what it could be, even in lean times, Madam Chair. So thank you very much for the committee's attention. And very frankly, I consider the table in your committee a very safe place to be. So thank you.
Right. Senate File 2219, as amended, is laid over. It will be revisited as soon as we have a clear definition of persons with disabilities. Senator Abeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Senator Westrom's bill. It's number 7 on the agenda, number 4 before us today. Senate File 3336. And Senator Kupek, on behalf of Senator Westrom, who is not able to be with us, is presenting his bill. Thank you very much for doing that, Senator Kupek. It's a courtesy. Would you prefer that Senate Counsel explain the bill, or are you familiar enough with it to also do it yourself?
Madam Chair, I can go through the bill, and then I'll have Senate Counsel be my backup if she feels I've goofed in any way, shape, or form.
That's great. Thank you very much. So we now have presented by Senator Kupek, Senate File 3336, Senator Westrom. Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Senate File 3336 is a bill to help those waste recovery facilities get some rebate money for some of the recyclable material that they pull out. So Section 1 just has the definitions of what recyclable material are, what a resource recovery facility is, waste to energy facility. Section 2 requires that owners and operators give a report of all of the recyclable and compostable material that they have pulled out from the waste to energy facilities. And then subdivision 3 is the rebate calculation, and this would be the money that would be taken and given to each of those facilities given the amount of each type of waste that they have pulled out. The allocation of the revenues comes out of the solid waste fund, so that's where the money would come from for the bill.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Senator Kupek, or are there additional details that we should be aware of, Senate Council? No? Okay. So we have witnesses. First of all, Commissioner Senjum, if you would identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, rather. Dave Senjum, a county commissioner from Homestead County, from Rochester. And it's good to be before the tax committee again. It feels like the altar of government, Senator Rest, from the standpoint of what we do up here and how it gets done. But let me just speak a little bit to this bill. And I speak on behalf of Homestead County and myself. I have instincts, at least, that I speak for a lot of counties across Minnesota, although I don't come with that authority this morning because we just haven't laid that plan out from the standpoint of authorization. But recycling is obviously a very, very important part of, and certainly a growing part of, the solid waste industry, if you will. And that industry, in large part in Minnesota, is a partnership between private haulers, if you will, and certainly counties. And there may be others, but certainly I come today from the standpoint of the county perspective. As we look at where we are in Homestead County, and I think a lot of counties, we certainly are at the point where the low-hanging fruit has been collected, and now we need to go further. And going further obviously requires resources. This particular bill, although the resources, I would say, are, at least in terms of the ask, are meager. In the world that we live in, everything helps. And to the extent that this committee and the legislature might support some additional money coming out of the solid waste management tax to help us with the recycling. And by the way, this bill is structured so that there's a lot of accountability within this bill from the standpoint of if we do this, we will get more recycling. That is part and parcel of this bill, and what makes it, I think, particularly attractive. So from that point of view, I think it's going down the right path. But Madam Chair and members, I think we all know this, but I'll just say it. There is recycling makes sense anyway, but there's a growing perspective amongst the public where more needs to be done. We live in a world, if you will, where I think we've come to understand maybe perhaps a little bit better every day that resources are not unlimited, that we've got to take a look at how we're doing things, and we have to the extent possible, do things better, and particularly from the standpoint of conserving resources. And that's what this recycling bill is all about. So, Madam Chair, I'll certainly stand for questions. Well, I think what I've said is just basically what you know, and frankly, a lot of public common sense. But again, to the extent that we can use this solid waste management tax a little bit further to help us within the structures of county governments and other ways, other places, other participants in the solid waste management programs across Minnesota to do this better, I think we'll be better off for it. I'm reminded of what Senator Thomasoni used to say, it's a good bill, let's do it.
Thank you, Commissioner Senjum. I would point out that there is a letter of support among, in our folders from Olmsted County, signed by the chair. There are also letters of support from the Minnesota Resource Recovery Association, and there is support in concept from the city of Minneapolis. Next testifier is Mr. Chris McCon, Otter Tail County, and the MRRA Board Chair. Thank you for your letter of support in our packet, sir. If you'd identify yourself for the record.
Yes, good morning. My name is Chris McCon, Chair of Minnesota Resource Recovery Association and Solid Waste Director for Otter Tail County. Madam Chair, Rest, and Tax Committee members, first of all, we want to thank you for your work in 2023, 24, and 25 to divert additional SCORE funding back to the Environmental Fund from the General Fund. MRRA fully supports additional SCORE resources and bills introduced this year, but understands with the current economic state that this is a reasonable ask, or a meager, as Commissioner Senjum mentioned. So a little bit of background on the solid waste management tax. About 16% of that tax comes back to the counties in the form of SCORE grants of the $121 million of solid waste management tax generated. And we, the counties, have been assigned by the state lead responsibility for managing solid waste. Further, those SCORE fund grants levels have remained relatively flat and well below normal inflation. The general fund portion has been increasing each year, as unfortunately solid waste streams and landfill deposits have also continued to grow and outpace the recycling and landfill diversion work. So currently, if you'd look at the MPCA SCORE report, statewide, we're at less than 50% recycle rate. That 50% rate, or that rate that we're at, is a combination of recycling of what you would put in a cart and also the compost organics recycling. This bill addresses several comments that we have heard from the legislator over past versions. And just to quickly go through those, in 2017 and 2018, the bill was referred to as a refund, and that really isn't accurate, so it's been changed to be a rebate. In 2019, the version actually removed money, or proposed to remove all the 30% away from the general fund. And as we've listened and heard from senators and representatives, that's not a realistic ask. So what we've done here is tried to make it very specific, and the goal is to, instead of taking away from the general fund, we're trying to match what the growth in the solid waste management tax is, so that it's not reducing the general fund. Also, recent bills proposed increased SCORE funding for all counties, and what we heard on that last year was, why would we do that without specific review or proof of what that money will be spent for? So in this version, as again, Commissioner Senjum mentioned, we have proof, like it's I'm not sure what to call it, but we have evidence through our reporting to the MPCA of the good work that we've done, and for that good evidence, there's a rebate that's received. Again, going back to the bigger picture, we're at less than 50% recycle rate. If you look at the history, we have plateaued. I think there's great work being done in recycling. It's very important. However, we're looking to make progress in other areas. As you may remember, last year there was an extended producer responsibility law where we're trying to get the manufacturers to be stakeholders in reviewing waste, or how their manufactured items could become waste. And now we're looking at how we can get into the garbage. We have a term called source separated, which is when the people publicly, voluntarily put things that are recyclable into a recycling bin. What this is dealing with is the 50% of the material that the public has decided not to selectively remove. It's in our garbage. We receive it at our facilities and we want to pull it out to be recycled. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here to answer any questions that you or the committee may have.
Thank you very much. We have one more testifier, Ms. Lucy Mullaney. Thank you, gentlemen. Welcome to the committee. Could you identify yourself for the record?
Thank you, Chair Rest and members of the committee. I'm Lucy Mullaney. I'm the Vice President of Policy for Eureka Recycling. We're a social enterprise recycler here in Minnesota committed to improving recycling and reducing waste. I'm also here on behalf of the Minnesota Zero Waste Coalition. While we agree that recyclables should not be sent to landfills or burned in incinerators, we do have significant concerns with the language. As this committee heard earlier this session when hearing legislation from Senator Dibble that would expand SCORE funding, cities and counties across Minnesota are facing growing financial pressure to maintain critical waste reduction programs. Directing limited public resources toward facilities that manage waste only after it's being discarded diverts much-needed SCORE funding away from upstream strategies like reuse systems, source-separated organics collection, and equitable recycling access. There is still a lot that we need to do to improve high-quality recycling. The bill also includes a rebate for waste-to-energy facilities based on the volume of incinerator ash they generate for use in construction projects or, quote, other approved uses. This creates a troubling incentive to burn waste instead of reducing it. Incinerator ash often contains hazardous substances like heavy metals, and using it in construction materials presents long-term environmental and public health risks due to the potential for toxic leaching into surrounding soil and water. Additionally, it's unclear what other approved uses would refer to and who would approve this. Public funds should be directed toward reducing harm, not subsidizing disposal methods that perpetuate pollution. Instead, we urge the committee to prioritize efforts to expand the amount of SCORE funding this year that's available to local communities for reduction, reuse, community composting, and strong recycling systems. We are also committed to working together on language that supports our shared goal of diverting recyclables from incinerators and landfills. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Senator Weber, please keep in mind we have two more bills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question, I guess, for any of the testifiers. I served on the city council in Laverne from 1985 to 1993, or 91. And I was a member of the county solid waste advisory committee at that time. And this is when recycling was just coming into being and what have you. And now we're at a point where that amount of recyclable materials that the public is willing to do. And obviously every community has a different method because our communities are different. The rural area is entirely different than the metro area, and we all understand that. But we've had, I think, fairly aggressive campaigns to stimulate or try to convince the public to recycle more. How do you increase that? I mean, we hear, well, you need to spend more money, but at the end of the day, I think after, 30-some years, the public has already indicated that they are probably maxed out as to what they are willing to do. So for those that believe we should spend more money promoting this, how do those dollars get spent, and what is the way to convince the public?
So Senator Kupek, if you would give a brief answer, we do need to move on.
Sure, I will, and I'll kind of include why also I've kind of signed on to this bill. So I also have an electronics waste recycling bill that I am also trying to move through that would capture more on the front end. And I absolutely agree with the recycling people that testified here. Grabbing this stuff on the front end is great. But to your point, Senator Weber, some people are not going to those places. We do not have, in a lot of places, they are not convenient at all. Times are not convenient for these drop-off locations, and they are throwing them into their trash. And so when I visited my waste recycling facility that my county is a share of in Perham, there are bins of laptops that they have pulled out from the sorting, going through cages full of extension cords and other electronics that they are then pulling out at a cost, because it is somewhat of a labor-intensive job to pull that out, to make sure that they do not get put into the incinerator, that the burn from that is cleaner, more efficient. They get a better score on that, and they get a better efficiency if they don't burn that type of stuff within that incinerator. So those costs are being bared at the end, too. So I think really, in some ways, we should have a two-prong approach. Get more on the front end, absolutely, but then some of this stuff is still going to make it through, and this money allocates towards that stuff on the back end that these places are capturing, but not recouping the money for doing that, kind of whether that's doing the right thing and also economically doing the right thing as well. I don't know if that quite gets to your point or not, Senator Weber.
Senator Weber.
Madam Chair, I think, and perhaps Ms. Mullaney, if she would come back up, how do we, what my question is, how do you get it out of the deposit at the center to begin with? And how do you, and what kind of expenses would you see the additional money going towards in order to get more of the recyclables out upstream?
Ms. Mullaney, if you would be very brief.
Sure. So first, we do agree that these recyclables need to be pulled out, but we think that prioritizing SCORE funding needs to happen first, expanding that for communities. There is a lot that we can do as a state to improve recycling capture before it goes to disposal. One would be a bottle bill, which we have bottle bill states around the country that have significantly higher recycling rates than other states. That's where you're putting a charge on a bottle for the consumer. When they return it, they get a rebate. We also, as was mentioned by a previous testifier, have recently passed the Packaging Waste and Cost Reduction Act, which is expected to expand recycling access. We have so many communities that don't actually even have access to recycling bins or multifamily recycling, expanded commercial recycling. So hopefully with that new law, we will see expanded access to recycling, and we're going to see more materials that are actually recyclable. So much of our packaging is not actually recyclable. So there's a lot that still can be done, and we certainly do not disagree that recyclables should be pulled out of the trash if possible. We just have concerns with the prioritization of funding.
Thank you, Senator Weber. Thank you so much, Senator Kupek, for presenting on behalf of Senator Westrom. And Senate File 3336 is laid over. The next bill before us is Senate File 2854. It's number 5, but it is number 8 on our agenda. Senator Carlson. Senator Carlson, welcome to the committee. We're pleased to have your bill before us. Welcome to the committee, Senator Carlson.
Good morning, Madam Chair Rest, and members of the committee. Today, I'm proud to present to you Senate File 2854, which would grant a sales tax exemption on the construction materials and outfitting equipment for an exciting economic development proposal in the city of Eagan. I'll do a quick summary of each section of the bill just to try to maintain speed here and stay within my allotted time. Section 1 exempts materials and supplies used in the construction of a research and development campus, customer experience center, and related facilities if the campus has a laboratory space of at least 250,000 square feet and a total cost of at least $200 million within a 32-month period. This exemption expires March 1st of 2008. Section 2 adds building materials, equipment, and supplies for the R&D campus, the Customer Experience Center, and related facilities to an existing list of items that are exempt from the gross receipts tax. This is effective for sales and purchases made after June 30th of 2025. Section 3 makes conforming changes to the current law. Madam Chair, we are proud of the fact that Minnesota is home to 17 Fortune 500 companies, one of the highest per capita numbers in the nation. With your support of this bill, we can build on this success. Ecolab, a global sustainability leader, and I must give a personal my personal support for this because Ecolab was my first employer as I became an engineer. I was employed by Ecolab actually before I graduated from engineering school. But they currently operate a research and development campus in my district, and they're exploring the options for a new R&D facility. Total cost estimates for the modern R&D lab and customer experience center. The innovative training facility will are estimated to exceed $500 million in private investment. The first phase of construction, estimated to cost between $200 and $250 million, could begin this year and would create hundreds of construction jobs. The Experience Center is expected to bring in thousands of individuals from around the world to Eagan and Dakota County this year. Although Minnesota is in international competition for this exciting project, a sales tax exemption on construction materials for the first phase of the project would give our state an advantage and demonstrate our commitment to economic growth. The increased revenue from the construction and out-of-state visits alone would make this proposal a net positive to the region and the state. In support, I think you have in your packet a letter that is signed by Dakota County Chair, Commissioner Chair Mike Slavic. We did have a commissioner that was going to testify here, but unfortunately they have their monthly meeting today, so they couldn't be here, but they are in strong support. I also have a quotation from Ms. Diane Miller, the Eagan City Manager, who expressed her support on behalf of the city, and she's thrilled to see the growth of R&D and in keeping high-tech industry in Minnesota, and of course, especially in Eagan. To help further explain the significance of this project for our state and regional economy, I have with me today Dr. Andy Cooper, Senior Vice President for Research and Development and Ecolab's Global Institutional and Specialty Sector. With that, I would
Thank you,
refer
thank
to
you,
Dr.
Senator
Cooper.
Carlson. I will note in our packets, there is a letter of support from the Dakota County Board of Commissioners. I would also point out the revenue estimate, and that this exemption would be, as we're familiar seeing, administered as a refund. And Senator Carlson has already indicated that the total taxable materials for qualifying projects, and it might include more than just Ecolab, is approximately $220 million within the the time provided in the bill. Mr. Cooper from Eagle Lab, if you would identify yourself for the record, we welcome your testimony.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So again, Dr. Andy Cooper, I'm Senior Vice President, Research Development and Engineering with Ecolab for 27 years next month. And so we have a proud over 100-year tradition of innovation and partnerships with the biggest companies, communities, and scientific institutions around the world. And so I have the privilege to lead nearly 1,000 employees in Ecolab in Eagan, where I'm located. And that's a subset of almost 3,000 employees within Minnesota and 50,000 employees around the world as we operate in 170 countries. And so the excitement around this project is really built around re-envisioning what this campus potential could be, particularly as part of the Minnesota really high-tech community. I see it all the time when we recruit people who are now younger than my own children into the company, and they bring with them their partners, their spouses, their families that make use of our schools, our universities. It's really a tremendous community and environment that we've built, which is part of the network effect really within Minnesota, as there's these synergistic really impact to having this critical mass of high-tech companies that are located and based here. And so as we review this potential project and what it can be, it's really a big question of scope. I have to figure out how to co-locate all the different scientific and engineering disciplines that drive innovation with our biggest customers. And part of that vision is to have this customer experience center here where our biggest customers from around the world can come and visit, co-innovate with us, and really benefit from the environment that's created here and in order to create that innovative future that we're all working on that's really grounded in sustainability and economic benefit for our communities and our customers around the world. And so we're really looking forward to really nailing down what the scope of that project can be in Eagan. And these sorts of incentives help us make sure and help me identify how I can co-locate those scientists and engineers that I really need to do that here in Minnesota. So that's the project proposal summary. I would love to share with you more details, but I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Senator Drazkowski, please briefly. We have two more bills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, you know, I'm kind of troubled by the direction of some of the bills that we're seeing come before us, Madam Chair, members. It used to be that sales tax exemptions, if they applied to private businesses, were done in the times of tornadoes and fires and other things that were catastrophes in order to simply help them get back up on their feet. Now we're seeing us move as a legislature towards writing bills that are directed at particular companies making winners and losers at the whim of the legislature. And I guess more alarming for me, Madam Chair and members, is we place our members in a conflict of interest situations as we see the corruption that has happened in this legislature with nonprofit organizations and direction of monies to them. This has the potential for the same effect, and I don't think we should be doing it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Anyone else at this point? Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Senator Drazkowski's sentiments aside, that is a concern of the entire legislature, and certainly is no reflection on the requests from Eagle Lab at this point. Senator Carlson, do you have any final comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, I do. One thing about this is a private investment. It is a bill that requires upfront expenditure of sales taxes, and then they have to be applied for to get any kind of reimbursement. So there are, let's say there are, you know, individuals that will be able to look over these to make sure that there isn't any funny business that goes on. And sales taxes are fairly easily determined. And so it is something that you know, we're looking at private investment, we're looking at property taxes, we're looking at lots of things that are settled already and if you look at the copy of the bill, you'll see that this is not the first time that we do sales tax exemptions. I think we have something like 18 prior authorizations for sales tax exemptions. So, Madam Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity to let me present this bill.
Of course.
Most of us support passing a bonding bill this year, which many will tout as a jobs bill or construction bill. This project entails over half the cost of $1 billion bonding bill with no state debt service. As you can see, we have a significant opportunity before us to ensure Minnesota is at the forefront of global innovation and sustainability. We appreciate your consideration of Senate File 2854. And by the way, this is not a promise that it will be here. This is an application that this is the location for this kind of expansion. So we appreciate your consideration and look forward to working with you as this provision advances through the legislative process.
Thank you very much. Senator
Madam
Carlson, Senate File 2854 is laid over. Our next bill is Senate File 3017, Senator Hauschild. Senator Hauschild has the authors
2854.
the A1 amendment. We're just moving right along here. The A1 amendment, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The motion prevails and the amendment is adopted. Senator Hauschild.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I'll try to be quick. I know we're on a time crunch here. As you might remember, I am a former city councilor in Hermantown, so I'm very fond of my community, and I understand the growth opportunities in our community. And in fact, some may not know that Hermantown is actually the only growing community in northern Minnesota, if you can believe that. We have great opportunities for development, both in the business sector and in housing. And so what this bill does is it simply extends the sales tax for the community from, let me make sure I get this date right, December 31st, 2036 to December 31st, 2046. And Madam Chair, what this would allow is for the community to bond using those sales tax opportunities in the future to support infrastructure projects throughout the city. And with me, I do have testifier, the Deputy City Administrator, Joe Wickland.
Before we go to that person, Senator Hauschild, is there any substantive changes in your A1 amendment?
No, Madam Chair, it's just a couple of clarifications on some of the language in the bill,
Thank you.
unless council needs to provide any additional details, but to me, it wasn't too substantial.
Ms. Pollack?
Madam Chair, members, the amendment is somewhat substantive in that it makes two of the projects plural. So for example, in the current local sales tax authorization, the proceeds may be used to extend a sewer interceptor line and construct a booster pump station. The amendment makes those plural, so extending sewer interceptor lines and constructing booster pump stations.
Ms. Pollack and Senator Hauschild, simply as the bill was introduced, extending the time, but with lines 115 and 116 in the bill is not, as I understand it, a violation because it does not require local approval. It is not a violation of the moratorium. Ms. Pollack, with the addition of these conditions, does it become a violation of the moratorium?
Madam Chair, members, no, due to the same effective date provision in that the changes in the amendment would also be effective without local approval. So the local government would not have to do anything that would violate the moratorium.
Senator Hauschild, it's very important that that clarification be made.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, for that. That was enlightening, I think,
So
for
your
everybody.
testifier, the mayor of Hermantown? No?
Yep.
Who am I looking at here? If you'd identify yourself for the record, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Joe Wickland. I'm the Assistant
Mr.
City
Wickland.
Administrator for Hermantown. Mayor Boucher couldn't be here today. Obviously, an exciting opportunity for Hermantown, and it's a great honor to be here with you today. We're looking at an infrastructure addition on the southern edge of our city that would also not only provide housing opportunities, as we've had success doing in the past, but potentially unlock some economic possibilities in the southwest corner of our city. There is buildable lots there, rail, trunk highways, easy access to our airport, easy access to our shipping ports, power infrastructure. The last piece for us is to get the city-led utilities there, and that's the focus of why we're asking for this 10-year extension from 2036 to 2046. If we get into the nuts and bolts of what this tax has done for Hermantown, roughly $3 million per year comes in to the city through this particular tax that helps us work with developers who then pay their share of the infrastructure investments. In the past, those investments have a return of 8 private dollars for every $1 the city has spent. This is certainly a local boost. To Senator Hauschild's point, it has been an integral part of why we're one of the very few growing cities in northern Minnesota, but it's also had a regional impact with job creation, housing starts, and economic activity that we know spills outside of our borders as well. Again, so when you combine the residential possibilities that come with that southern edge and then the economic possibilities of the southwest edge, that's why we're looking at this particular extension so that we can move on it now. Obviously, those targets and those projects take a great deal of time, and this frees us up to do what we've really been successful at doing over the last decade.
Just going to have to reschedule Pappas. Okay. Any questions? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first, a little preface, and then I guess my question. I am a little concerned about the fact that what the voters voted for was one sewer interceptor line and one booster pump now is unlimited. And extending the tax by extending the, well, it might not affect, the moratorium might not affect this, but what about the, I guess my question maybe is to Ms. Pollack. What about the, what about the voting that the people of Hermantown voted for? I mean, they voted for 2 projects, now they're unlimited, and they voted for a certain amount of sales tax, and now, if I understand the math correctly, it will be $30 million more if it continues at $3 million a year for 10 years more. So does this not violate how voters approve local sales taxes?
I'm going to call on Ms. Pollack, but I think we have seen more than one proposal that's come before us that has been approved that does similar things. Ms. Pollack?
Madam Chair and Senator Nelson, with local sales taxes under the current statute, there have been many authorizations that, for whatever one reason or another, require either voter approval or filing local approval with the Secretary of State, or just the state authorizing changes without either or both of those things. So that's really a matter for the author's preference and the legislature's preference as to what new requirements would be enacted.
What we are assured is that this proposal does not violate the moratorium that we're currently under, and I'm assuming that that was done on purpose, consciously, you knew what you were doing.
So, Madam Chair, could I have just one follow-up
Senator
question?
Nelson, you may not approve of it, but it's certainly according to the law.
No, okay, so my other question, though, is specifically, though, we have made these changes before, but Madam Chair, the difference that is sometimes seeing in my mind is it's 2 together. It's not just extending the date, we also are extending what projects are eligible, and that's my question. Have we done that before? It seems.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's thank you.
It may not be the wisest policy, Senator Nelson, but it is according to the law. Okay. Anyone else? Senator Hauschild, any final brief comment, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would just note that Hermantown is a community that is adjacent to Duluth, and a lot of Hermantown residents shop in the Duluth region. I think Senator Nelson would be familiar with that, representing Rochester and the surrounding communities. But in this case, what we're doing in Hermantown is making it so that our sales tax is the same. And so when folks shop at Menards versus Home Depot, which are within a mile of each other, the sales tax is the same, but the community of Hermantown benefits from shoppers from around the region paying for some of our infrastructure and helping with that. Now, if we were to say we don't want to extend the sales tax or we want to remove the sales tax, all we would be doing is shifting that burden onto the local property owners in Hermantown fully. So I think a lot of Hermantown residents see the benefits of this sales tax matching the community of Duluth, given our adjacency to that community.
Thank you very much, Senator Hauschild. Senate File 3017, as amended, is laid over. The last bill we have before us is Senate File 2657, Senator Pappas.
Thank you.
Senator Pappas, on your behalf, Senator Hauschild moves the A4 amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Madam Chair, I apologize, but I wanted to further amend the A4.
You what?
I want to further amend the A4 before you adopt it. I want to amend the amendment.
Do we have language to that effect in writing?
Madam Chair, I talked to Senate Counsel this morning, and it just merely involves removing Section 3.
Section 3.
Of the A4 amendment.
Senator, I'm sorry, Ms. Pollack, would you inform us of what the A4 amendment, we will include a correction in the amendment to be offered by Senator Hauschild. If you would explain that to us. We don't like doing that, but we will.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, you'd like me to explain the effect of the modification to the
Yes.
A4 amendment? Yes, so what the A4 amendment does on lines 2.6 through 2.11 is strike the requirements regarding the 80-20 split of the of a portion of the St. Paul local sales tax revenue. And so by deleting the relevant lines in the A4 amendment, the requirement for the 80-20 split would be retained.
Okay, do members understand the modification that is now part of the A4 amendment? Senator Hauschild? Okay, Senator Hauschild offers the A4 amendment as modified by the deletion of lines, whatever it is, 2.6 to 2.11.
Just
Ms. Pollack?
Madam Chair, the amendment would be to, the amendment to the A4 would be to delete lines 2.1 to 2.16.
Okay, the whole thing, all right. Is that clear to everyone? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails, and the amendment is before us. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank
Please
you,
explain
members,
your-
for adopting the amendment. As background, in 1993, the legislature authorized the city of St. Paul to impose a half-cent local sales tax. And I actually, 32 years ago, was the author of that original bill. And the purpose was to pay for the city's capital expenses related to the St. Paul Civic Center complex, which we now know as the Xcel Energy Center Arena Complex. The arena complex is a city-owned facility which includes the arena, the Roy Wilkins Auditorium, and the River Center Convention Center. The second purpose was to fund capital projects to further residential, cultural, commercial, and economic development in downtown St. Paul and in St. Paul neighborhoods through the Cultural and the Neighborhood Star programs. So what the amendment, what the bill, Senate File 2657, as amended, does four things. Section 1 increases the bonding authority for the half-cent St. Paul local sales tax from $65 million to $400 million. Under current law, additional bonds may be issued as long as the total principal amount of additional bonds and previously issued bonds does not exceed $130 million. That amount is now increased to $500 million and is effective the day after filing of local approval with the Secretary of State. Section 2 extends the expiration date of the tax from the current December 31st, 2042 to December 31st, 2060, again effective after local approval with the Secretary of State. Section 3 is the language that we removed, and Section 4 deals with the appointment of members to the STAR Board. The current language is very prescriptive, and it says the STAR Citizen Review Panel has to be 3 residents from each of the 7 city council wards for a total of 21 members. And instead, we're giving the city local control to determine the makeup of the board, which is appointed by the mayor. And that's also effective with local approval and with the Secretary of State. Madam Chair, I have 2 testifiers. Mr. John McCarthy, who's the St. Paul City Finance Director. He's going to testify and provide some background of what projects have been funded over the past 32 years. And then also on Zoom, we have Council President Rebecca Naker.
Thank you, Senator Pappas. We will be laying the bill over, but I do caution you that the current language is a potential violation of the moratorium. Mr. McCarthy, is it?
Good morning, Chair Rest and committee members. I'm John McCarthy, and I'm the Finance Director for the City of St. Paul. Here this morning to testify in support of Senate File 2657, which relates to St. Paul's half-cent sales tax program. As Senator Pappas noted, in 1993, the legislature authorized St. Paul to collect the half-cent sales tax to make improvements to the St. Paul Arena and Convention Center complex, and to create the neighborhood sales tax revitalization and cultural sales tax revitalization programs, otherwise known as Neighborhood Star and Cultural Star. The goal of STAR is to further residential, cultural, and economic and commercial development within St. Paul. The Neighborhood Star program has provided business loans and grants to projects across St. Paul, including recent investments in the Victoria Theater renovation, the Sena Foundation renovations, Wakantipi Center, Plaza del Sol, and Frogtown Crossroads. And the Cultural Star program has provided grants to St. Paul's many cultural organizations, including the Center for Hmong Arts and Talent, Eastside Freedom Library, Indigenous Roots, the Irish Fair of Minnesota, the Minnesota Children's Museum, the Science Museum of Minnesota, and the Stepping Stone Theater, to name a few. And STAR has provided funding for key capital investments at the Arena and Convention Center complex, including extensive roof repairs, which included solar installation, security enhancements, and accessibility upgrades. Authority to collect this half-cent sales tax is set to expire in 2042. Senate File 2657 would extend St. Paul's half-cent sales tax through 2060, and the bill would also increase the cap on total bonding backed by sales tax to $500 million, including debt that's already been issued. St. Paul's half-cent sales tax has been a crucial tool for economic development and cultural investments across St. Paul. Over the last 25-plus years, STAR has generated hundreds of millions of dollars and funded thousands of neighborhood and cultural investments in St. Paul, and it has been the primary funding source for important capital repairs to the Convention Center complex. As these 3 facilities that make up that complex age, St. Paul needs a dedicated funding source to keep those city-owned capital assets in good condition. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. You have another witness. Senator Pappas?
Senate Council President Rebecca Naker is on Zoom.
Yes, is she here?
On Zoom.
Oh, she's on Zoom. And Senator Pappas, what I have experienced firsthand is in this room, when someone is on Zoom, that person is not visible to the author. Mm-hmm. And so, because you may want to engage her, if you would, for the time being, while she's testifying, move to the members table here so that you can see her. I found it very disconcerting to hear a witness only without being able to see them, or the captioning, which should be on now.
Well, good morning, Chair Rest. Should I begin my testimony?
Just a moment. Okay, with captioning is on. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Rest and members of the Taxes Committee. My name is Rebecca Naker. I'm the St. Paul City Council President, and I also represent Ward 2, which includes downtown St. Paul and the city's west side neighborhood. I apologize that my camera seems to be making it look like I'm in some sort of strobe lighting environment, but I assure you I am safe in my office, and I apologize for that visual effect. I'm here today to testify in support of SF 2657 and the importance of this bill for downtown St. Paul and our entire city. As you heard from Director McCarthy, extending the city's half-cent sales tax to 2060 is really vital for us to be able to continue to develop and invest in the Xcel Energy Center arena, which we know is one of the biggest drivers of economic impact in the city, and it's also an important statewide asset. As the council member who represents downtown, I am acutely aware of the need for investment in downtown right now. Just this year, we've already seen 1 million people from all around the state visit the arena complex, and we have to be able to continue to invest in the largest economic driver of our downtown. The proposed changes to the Neighborhood Star program give more local control to what's really been an important program. Through Neighborhood Star, we're able to significantly invest in small businesses throughout our city, and the changes we're requesting give us more local control over the makeup of the Citizen Review Board, which is a really important partner to make sure that STAR resources reach all corners of the city. Right now, the city has 2 issues. The board is extremely large, 21 members. There's a lack of ability to fill all the 21 seats, and therefore the board regularly is not able to make quorum. And that obviously impedes our ability to do the work of the board. The City Council and Mayor will continue to work in close partnership with our constituents to make sure the STAR Board is the right size to oversee these resources, but we are requesting the flexibility as a local community to determine the right size and configuration of that body. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Council President. Senator Pappas, do you want to make any further comment at this time before we lay the bill over?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's kind of amazing to me that we've had this opportunity for the last 32 years, and it has funded multiple projects throughout the city, plus kept our arena up to date. And I'm just would really appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, yes, Senator Weber.
Very briefly, I would just comment regarding the Citizens Committee. I agree, 21 members is some overkill but I question getting rid of the geographic balance, because when you have these large special projects, they directly affect one area of this community. But I do think that it's important that all members of the community have an opportunity to have input. Someone could, at some point, in preparation for a major project, skew the membership of that board to be supportive of it. And I just bring that comment up as a concern.
Thank you, Senator Weber. Senator Pappas, as I mentioned that your bill is a possible violation of the moratorium, and we take that very seriously. And it comes because of the requirement for local approval. Are there any other comments for Senator Pappas? Thank you very much, and your testifier. And Senate File 2657 as amended is laid over. Members, I'm sorry for the delay today, but I think we got through a number of important bills. Tomorrow we will begin at 9 a.m. and we will be hearing the E12 Omnibus Bill and the HHS Omnibus Bill. There being no further business before us, we're adjourned.